Hello everyone and welcome to Capes, Cows and Masks, the show where we uncover the world of soups and science fiction. I'm your host, Jake Hart. I'm a podcaster, a sound designer and a writer for the Fresh Take Hub. And as always, I'm joined by my fellow co-host.
Hi everyone, it's Tom Gapper here, aspiring writer, podcaster and your Matrix Shogun. I'm kidding, no, Jake's the Matrix Shogun. I am a humble apprentice in awe of his amazing knowledge of Matrix lore. Teach me, O wise one.
I can only show you the door. You have to be the one that walks through it.
Oh, see, he knows.
I knows. He knows. Yes, so yeah, as you mentioned up top, we are continuing our week of The Matrix. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the sequels, the expanded world of The Matrix, and what is the future of this franchise, if any. And as last week, we welcome back to the show for this discussion, Stefanos Florakis. How you doing, Steph?
I am good. Besides yesterday with the announcements of the Academy, and I'm so frustrated. And yes, let's nominate all these Hollywood stars, but film editors, nah, fuck them. They're not part of filmmaking. Who the fuck are they? So let's just skip over them. It's just so disappointing because they're trying so hard to bring back an audience that don't give a shit, and then they fuck over us who give a shit, and they're just betraying their only audience that they actually care. Like, what the fuck is the point?
You read my fucking mind, Steph. Tom, did I not say this in our group chat?
You did.
I was like, the general audience do not give a fuck about the Oscars. Film nerds do, cinephiles do, so, I don't know, appeal to them because they're the ones that are going to be tuning in and actually care about what's going on. Yeah. Less ads, less bad comedians having bad jokes on stage as hosts, and more appreciating the art and the talent behind it. I mean, come on, the Academy needs to do better.
I'm just thinking, if they have done that on the year Ennio Morricone won his first and only Oscar for The Hateful Eight, how extremely disrespectful would have been. Or even, Charlie Chaplin, the only Oscar he won was for original score. And that is going to be the one they're going to put on the sides. I mean, why would they want to show, possibly and hopefully Hans Zimmer winning his second Oscar?
Since The Lion King.
Since The Lion King, come on. And also, even the smaller categories, which, come on, if there's the few categories that I'm so fully in love with, the short films, because those are the artists that are trying so hard to be fucking seen. And to just tell them that is basically telling them they're not important. And also the fact that one of them, for best live action shorts, the forerunner to win is a film with Riz Ahmed that he's actually nominated. Riz Ahmed could actually win. Last year, he was one of the favorites for Sound of Metal, but now, well, it doesn't matter because he's not Best Actor, so fuck it. So yeah, hopefully, the whole fucking industry is saying what the fuck is this? And they're gonna change their minds. If they don't,
it's mind-boggling. It's absolutely mind-boggling, and they need to do better. Same shit, different year, I guess. All right, so let us get into this then. Unless Tom, you have anything to say about the Oscars, or
as I said to you before we start the show, just as has happened every year for the past 5 or 6 years, I've just given less and less of a shit about the Oscars, to the point that they could release, or they could just be yeah, the Oscars are tonight and we'll let you know all the winners. I'm just I'll catch it on Twitter and maybe I'll pretend to care. So that's where I'm at. I just don't care anymore. I just want to go and see good films and see those films appreciated. I couldn't give a shit if that appreciation comes in the form of them holding a golden man. I just don't care.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but for me, I particularly care this year because of Dune. Like, I'm looking at Dune, I'm like, you can do it, man. Do a Lord of the Rings, do an entire. It won't, but I'm hoping it does like that sweep, where it just.
That would make me care. That would make me care. Only if Dune gets an entire sweep.
It's probably not going to happen. I'm being optimistic there, but
and also, I mean, like I would like Shang-Chi to win its nomination. But all I'll settle for is that if it is going to be a Marvel film winning that particular category, that it's Shang-Chi and not No Way Home. Things for visual effects, I feel like Shang-Chi is better.
Yeah, I would agree. Anyways, let's get into two films that are particularly full of visual effects, and a lot of people have definitely some thoughts on how visual effects were handled in these films, and that is The Matrix Reloaded and The Revolution. So get into these two sequels first, then we'll talk about the expanded worlds like the comics, the games, and the Animatrix, and then we'll finish off with talking about the Resurrections. So, Steph, I'll start with you. Like, what was your first introduction to these sequels, Reloaded and Revolutions? Did you see them as a package with the first one? Or were you first introduced to the first one and then a bit later you found the sequels?
Now, I do remember when the sequels came out, and I remember being very confused because they were both of the same year. And I still am. I still very much am confused that happened because
6 months apart from each other.
But that's the thing. Harry Potter did the same thing with 6 months apart, but it was still like the one was 2010 and the other was 2011. It was always that dichotomy of them two being kind of separated. Or at least the idea that it's been a year apart. But for them two, it's fascinating. It's almost like how some shows do now, where they release a part one of its season and the part two later on in the year. Which that kind of makes sense because it's television, is that kind of narrative that could work. But for films, especially that's big blockbusters, it's very strange. As for when I first saw them, most likely was when they came out on DVD, and I watched them because still I was too young to go to the cinema to watch them. And yeah, I think as a kid I liked Revolutions a lot more, but again because I was a stupid kid that liked fighting. uh, but yeah, I have thoughts. I have thoughts both. I don't hate them, as a lot of other fans do, but I could definitely see criticisms.
Oh, well, we'll get into the fan reaction of the sequels. Yeah, I think my introduction to these, they came in a bit later from the first film for me. And like living in Gibraltar, you don't know. And it's not like today where you go on Twitter and you find out 5 years in advance of what the movies are coming out. I had no idea that the sequels were even coming out, sort of thing. And I think it was Christmas of 2003 where I got the DVD of The Matrix Reloaded, and I was like, oh shit, they made another one? It's like, what the hell? How have I not heard about this? And obviously, they didn't make as much of an impact as the first one did. So I did, the first one, I heard whispers, about this sort of thing. Didn't really get that with the sequels. So watched the DVD. I fell in love with it, not as much as the first one, but it was sort of like my issues with it. I didn't understand until I was a bit older, if you know what I mean. But then I remember seeing the tag of Revolutions at the end of the credits of Reloaded. I don't know if you remember this, Steph, or you, Tom, but there was it wasn't like a post-credit scene. It was like a trailer sort of thing, like a teaser trailer. And then I remember being like, oh, they made a third one. But it was so long before I could finally get my hands on it. And again, a bit more disappointed with that one. But it's funny because with these films, and we'll get into it, for me, they're aging better over time. And each time I watch them, I find new things to appreciate about them. But at the time, I was more a fan of Reloaded just because... It's funny you mentioned that you preferred Revolutions because of the action, because I actually prefer Reloaded because for me, it has more action and more exciting set pieces. And I thought Revolutions let me down in that sense. So yeah, that was sort of my introduction to those films. And they became a big part of me carrying on my, through my teenage years and stuff like that. But what about you, Tom? What was your introduction to the sequels?
I think it was just I can't even remember when I first watched the first Matrix film. I think just at some point I found out that there were sequels, so I was like, oh well, I love the first Matrix film, got to watch the sequels. And I think I watched them both in one day, or maybe spread over 2 days. I can't remember. But I do remember, like, at the time, sort of just not gelling with them as much. Maybe it was like high expectations from like the first Matrix film, and then coming in and being like, oh well, this isn't like anywhere near as like revolutionary and stuff as the first one was. So I kind of put those films to the side, and generally if it was like time to rewatch the Matrix, it would just be rewatching the Matrix. I was like, I don't need to watch the sequels. First one is a good enough story on its own. Obviously, in preparing for this show, I rewatched them, and I've got to say, I actually really, really like both of them. And I'm kind of with Jake on saying Reloaded is probably my favorite of the two. I do think Revolutions has a few more problems that I still don't think are like quite haven't like I don't think they've aged as well. But yeah, overall, I had a very, very fun time rewatching the films. And like, oddly enough, some of the things that people had a problem with, especially in Reloaded, I actually found that like I really loved. Like, people make fun of that scene with the architect, and it's just like 10 minutes of exposition. But I'm just like, well, actually, it's actually only a little bit of exposition, but the philosophical ideas are so large that it requires a lot of words. So I love that scene. I think it's a great scene. I think it's a great film. Obviously, I still don't think that they're a patch on the first movie, but I definitely think that they're hated more than they should be. And I think it does come from people coming from seeing The Matrix to going to those and like just judging it on that alone and going like, oh well, this isn't as good as the first Matrix film, whereas it's not trying to be as good as or better than, it's just meant to be a continuation of the story they set up in the first Matrix film. We know the world now, we've lived in the world now, and I think these films help extend that and like fill in the world a bit more and give you like a few more characters and understand like things a bit better, go into a bit more obviously later on. But yeah, I honestly think a lot of people who nowadays say that they really don't like those sequels or they hate on the sequels probably haven't watched them in a while, probably long enough that like, because there's so many films like I watched 10 years ago that I hated that I watch now and I'm like, oh, actually, no, this is really good. I just didn't get it at the time. And I think people just need to maybe understand that sometimes you don't get something and it's okay to admit if you're wrong and to go back and like look on those things. So if you're someone who has in the past been like, oh, I really hate Reloaded and Revolutions, but you're thinking to yourself, hang on, I haven't actually seen that in a while, do yourself a favor and just give it another go. You may still hate it, but I'd be willing to bet you probably appreciate it a lot more now.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So that's it. It's because you have obviously a different relationship to maybe me and Steph, because like you said, you didn't continue watching them. You sort of left them aside. So, and I was actually going to make this point that I do implore people to give these films another chance, because you may not have got some things when you first watched them, because, I only understand a lot of these films now because upon so many repeat viewings. And I totally understand why fans initially would be thrown off with these sequels because of the amount of exposition and stuff going on. That it's maybe goes over their head, or it's just too dense. It's just so much thrown at you at once. And I totally get that. As well as other things why maybe the fans overall disliked these sequels. But Steph, where do you stand with this? Before we get into like a bit deeper into what these films are about and stuff, what's your overall like thoughts on Reloaded and Revolutions, and why do you think they're genuinely disliked by the fandom?
Where I stand with these films, it's complicated. It's almost the kind of relationship that to some degree is something wrong. You know that they should break up at some point, but it's just simply they don't. It's not necessarily because they love each other, but because there is a sort of mutual understanding. And it's that difficult and complex explanation. This is exactly what I think about the sequels. It's I don't think they're bad films. I think the okay, like here's my main issue I have with both of them. In the end of the day, the big problem that I have with them is pacing. It's There's a lot about them, and the main reason I don't really like Reloaded as much as the other sequels because it doesn't always feel coherent. It always feels there's this one set piece, then the next set piece, and then the next set piece, and and for me, it kind of could lose the point to what the stakes were, especially when Merovingian appears. And I do really like Merovingian overall, but I had to really come to appreciate him and what he is and he represents. But as for first viewing, even now when I was showing to my friends, they all go like, "Who the fuck is that? What the fuck
Yeah.
is he talking about? Wait, did he do something to this cake? Wait, the cake has orgasm? What the fuck?" Like it's one of those very outside the box.
Batshit crazy.
Yes, which I do come to appreciate it, but I think for me that is where a bit sometimes loses me because I think if there was a bit more campiness to it, I think would have worked better. I think like when I mean campiness, I mean we're gonna talk about the resurrections. What I mean, like because resurrections has Revision, he's so fucking camp, and I think that works better for me than than Reloaded, mainly because of how overtly serious the film takes itself, and that's which is absolutely fine. But because you present such huge ideas in on the paper sort of outlandish situations, you can really lose the purpose to what you're trying to say. And I think that is something for some fans were thrown off because the beauty of the first Matrix is the fact that overall it seems like a simple film, or at least a simple plot, but that is where they bring out the complexity. Reloaded became extremely complicated, and while also trying to present very difficult subject matters, and all that together could be overwhelming for some people. For me, I've come to appreciate it a lot more, but I do have to admit that I don't have as much. I don't feel the stakes into these situations, especially. And I think that's where, for me, I prefer the action on Revolutions over Reloaded, because on Revolutions, the action, although it's not perfect, there was a purpose to it. Like there was the the huge stakes that we need to fight because Zion will fall, and Neo has to fight because it's the only way to stop the war and defeat Smith. Like it was very clear to what our heroes had to do. But in Reloaded, it felt far more action pace, and then a chase, and then an action piece, which on their own they're great, but in an emotional level for me, I'm not fully invested. Oh, at least when Neo is, because Neo is fucking God. So, and then someone's sort of thinking, I don't know why you're struggling. I mean, come on, you just do like one swoop, but you can kill all of them. But with Morpheus and Trinity, this is where I feel the action sequences work far better for me because, like, this both of them are still human. They could still die, and one of them nearly does, and then dies in the next one, and then gets brought back in the next one.
It's a whole thing. It's
a whole thing.
Yeah. Well, here's where you're wrong, Steph. No, I respect your opinion. Like my overall thoughts on the sequels now, I don't think they're perfect films by any stretch. I do have some issues with them. My two main things with them is, like you said, Steph, some of the pacing, especially in Reloaded at times, I think were like, let's get the story moving a bit sort of thing. And some of the dialogue, I think the Wachowskis were maybe trying to overcomplicate things with the dialogue and try to make certain characters more smarter than they are, or even try to make the films a bit smarter than they are. Because what makes the first one so wonderful is that it's deep and philosophical and it is complex, but that's all under the layer. It's like layers of it through a simple storyline and simple central themes that we can all relate to. And I think what happens in the sequels, and particularly Reloaded, is that it flips everything on its head as well. And I think it's intentionally subverting expectations of what we feel as if what a sequel should be, what a blockbuster should be, what an action film should be, and stuff like that. And over time, I've grown to really appreciate them. So aside from those two things, I think, particularly Reloaded as well, I love these movies, man. Like, I just think, even though some of the dialogue is a bit over the top, now I can just spend 10 minutes with the Merovingian or the architect just talking all this stuff and laying it all down. And I'm just like, yes, give me more. Like, I'll be on YouTube and just watch like 10, 15 minutes of people just talking about philosophical stuff, and I'll eat that all up now. And over time, I've seen how the Wachowskis were really trying to go for something here. Trying to really push the boundaries of what a blockbuster is, of what an action picture is. But unfortunately, I think what let them down as well is that I think they were trying to do too much within too short a space of time. And we mentioned up top that they were only released 6 months apart from each other. I don't know. Granted, they were shot back to back because they wanted to have like this big epic one story feel. But I feel that if they had maybe focused on Reloaded, get that out in the cinemas, then start on Revolutions, I don't know if they would have turned out better, but they definitely would have turned out different, I think, because you have more central focus, as well as they had their, hands in all the other stuff that was going on, the Animatrix, Enter the Matrix video game, the comics. They were working on that. So I think they were getting a bit overwhelmed with the amount of work they had to do for this franchise around this time. As for why the fans didn't like them, it's like I said, I think it subverted expectations, especially in Reloaded. It told you the hero that you loved in the first film is actually just one of 6. There's nothing special about this guy. But I think that intentionally the Wachowskis are throwing that out there, but there's still layers of hidden messages and stuff that you have to dig in deep into within the themes that I think maybe just went over a lot of people's heads, and that's why they didn't vibe with it. As well as, action set pieces with being over too CGI and all of that. Having watched some of them now, I'm like, sure, there's some things that haven't dated, but again, man, you stick these up against any modern blockbuster, and I would say these look better. And I will also say, with the action set pieces, with Reloaded, I will disagree with you, Steph. I think not all of them, but I think like the big Agent Smith, the multiple Agent Smiths fights, I think that sets a purpose about bringing back Agent Smith into the story, knowing his abilities, his multiplying, all of that, and what leads on to in Revolutions. The chase scene as well is all about the Keymaker and getting him to, it's all plot driven, I think, personally. And I feel the emotional stakes in that, especially I agree with you. Neo, sometimes you think this guy can't be defeated, but there is an element of like cool to that. I think the Wachowskis was like, right, he's a beginner in the first one, let's level him up. He's like Superman in a way. Like, he's even doing the flying thing. So, like, overall, I have a lot of fun with these sequels, and for me, they age like a fine wine. I see things in them each time I watch them, and I love these movies, man. But yeah, Revolutions in a way is I have similar issues like I have with the Battle of the Five Armies, where most of the film is just one big action, war thing. And I'm like, okay, I need a bit more than that. And I feel as if with Revolutions, while Reloaded introduced a lot of new ideas and turned what we thought the Matrix was upside down, I felt as if Revolutions didn't add as many new ideas to the franchise as Reloaded did. So that's why maybe I fall a bit off Revolutions as well. I felt it's just continuing what was established in the first two films.
Well, one note to make about the Neo versus Agent Smith fight in Reloaded. That is one of the fight scenes of Neo that I really, really like. But my main problem with it is how much of it was practical, which is great, but then they had to use a lot of full PS3 CGI elements, which always throw me off because I'm so into the practical stuff. But then when it's all of a sudden I see the Robin Neo, Robin Agent Smith, that just takes me out of it. And it's not. I don't think it's a fact of it's an issues of its time that it was back in 2003. I think it's far more of the fact that even back then I was thrown off because I didn't feel that these particular shots were necessary in the thing, and that is what I would say the issues of pacing, where there will be some extra stuff that they bring down the overall quality of some great shit that they actually make.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, on the action as well, before we get into like our readings into the film, man, they still don't do action set pieces nowadays like they did in the like Reloaded, like the chateau fight and the highway scene. Man, that's just incredible filmmaking to achieve that in itself. Like, Tom, do you have anything to say about the action set pieces in these sequels? Like, compared to the first one, maybe? I think they maybe upped the game in terms of scale.
In terms of scale, sure. But I think in terms of like, I don't know, because the action in the first Matrix was something that was not really ever seen before in Western media to that extent. And I feel like, yeah, the sequels maybe just like, I feel like it was pretty much the same action. They just like took it and put it in bigger set pieces or had like more moving parts involved. I wouldn't say it was an improvement. I also wouldn't say that like things got worse. And also I tend to be very forgiving for like early 2000s films for any CGI effects, because it just CGI didn't look good back then. We kidded ourselves back then that it looked good just because we hadn't seen anything like it before. Whereas, you know, now you're watching most of those films going, oh my God, this looks so bad. I mean, even in the first Matrix film, there's some CGI in there that looks really dodgy as hell. When it, like in that first action sequence, when Trinity is like escaping and she like jumps through that window, that looks fucking terrible, but I don't care. And I think it's very much the same in Reloaded and Revolutions. It's just, yeah, I would like to see like all the fight scenes be 100% practical, but I know that in of itself is not practical. Also, just to sort of like state my overall thoughts on the sequels, I think they're very, very, very good. They're not, well, in terms of like, you know, if you were to ask me to list like the top 20 greatest like cinematic masterpieces of all time, sure, I wouldn't put Reloaded and Revolutions on there. But for my own sort of personal taste and for what it brings to the world, I think it expands on the world of the Matrix really well. And I think maybe people didn't gel with them as much because, as you said, Jake, you've got that subversion of the sort of hero's journey where you basically find out, oh yeah, this prophecy, this whole chosen one, yet that was created as another means of control. Because of course it was. It's one of those things where like you know, it shocks you at the time, but then like you think about it and you're like, well, yeah, actually, like what was the ultimate way to control a species that's always going to rebel? You make the rebellion seem like a choice when in actual fact it's just enabling you to further control them. And I do like how those two films like really compound and double down on the idea that choice is an illusion. And I think maybe it's possible that, and I said this for Resurrections, maybe it's possible that some people really took a disliking to these films because they all of a sudden got very uncomfortable with what was being put forward to them, because it's, if you think about it, it's also like an attack on capitalism and you know, like the Western world as we know it. Like we're constantly told that we have like so many choices that we can make. Like we can go and be a doctor, we can go and be a lawyer, we can be a film star, we can do this, we can do that. But in reality, can we? Can I just go out and be a doctor? No, I'd have to go and get a brand new degree and go through like all that, and I'd have to get the money for it. But then like then I'd have to find time for it as well, because I've got to get a job to go alongside. And like, what jobs do I get then? Is like, can I get the job I want, or do I have to pick a job that's just working for them? I think just like the Matrix really kind of like took that idea of just like, you don't have the choices you think you have. And I've got a feeling maybe some people, maybe like on a subconscious level, just rejected that because it was easier to reject that. And I definitely think that had an effect on Resurrections. I think Resurrections had a lot of things which, like, you know, you and me both said, Jake, we felt very seen at many points during that film. And I think it's the same in Reloaded and Revolution. There's plenty of little moments where I was kind of sat there just thinking, like, hearing what they were saying and thinking about myself and just being like, oh, damn, am I in the Matrix? Am I in the Matrix right now? So yeah, like it's. I think that they're both very, very important films, especially to the world of the Matrix, because I think like without those two films, you couldn't have Resurrections, just for many reasons. And yeah, I think people need to maybe open their minds a bit more philosophically.
Free your mind.
Yeah, free their minds. Come back to the sequels and maybe just sit there and have a think afterwards. Just really think on them.
Well, that's why I think as well with the sequels that they double down on the philosophy and the exposition in favor of the, like, against the action. Do you know what I mean? And I think people in a way were maybe expecting a second Matrix movie. Do you know what I mean? As in, like, we want the same sort of stuff, the same sort of style of action, that the focus be that. And I think they didn't get that. But as you talking about some of the themes that they were going for, let's get into that. Now, as I was like doing the notes, I was trying to think, well, what are like the central themes for each film? And the way I thought about it was like the first movie is about the triumph of free will over destiny. I think that's pretty evident. That's what the first film's about. Reloaded puts forward the idea of determinism, like the idea that what we experience as free might not actually be free. And what I think Revolutions really well does is that, and I think this is where I think it loses some people, that it's trying to apply both viewpoints. Like, it demonstrates that both free will and determinism are like simply perspectives that we project onto our own experiences. That's what I was sort of getting out of by the end of Revolutions.
Beautifully put.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Steph, I throw that at you. Am I going completely left field here, or do you agree with some of it, or what's your sort of reading of, like, particularly what Reloaded and Revolutions did?
Oh, I literally thought it was about causality and orgasmic cakes.
Oh, we'll get that. We'll get in there because there's a bit of that in there as well.
To be fair, you put it really well. I don't think I can add more than that. That's more or less how I kind of interpret them. But I think the only thing maybe I would change a bit, it would be on Revolutions, where basically it shows that both the illusion of the free will and the idea of determinism, even those in the end kind of fail through the mechanism of chaos, which basically would be Agent Smith, because he was in the end the actual anomaly within the broken system. He was the one that managed to disobey everything that it was known and become something new. Funny enough, a few months ago, I was talking to some friends that were discussing about Spotify and how the idea of when it goes on the random shuffle, it's not actually random. Its algorithm is based on the chaos factor, which basically is the human who is in control of that account. You keep that algorithm is the person that listens to all the music, and when they afterwards when they go to the shuffle, it's not random. It's based on what that person and the user likes. So you most of the times listens to, and throughout that the shuffle, it brings out first the songs that the user listens to the most, and that chaos factor is basically Agent Smith. And of course, there is the theory saying that Agent Smith is actually the one even though it's not exactly that, but the idea of what the one is in the Matrix for the mythos of the humans, more or less that's what Agent Smith is. And it's quite ironic it ended up being a program that instead of wanting to free the humans, well, he wanted to free the humans, but in a more sadistic way. and and how that extremist idea could turn into a purely fascistic persona. Um, Actually, I kind of lost my point. What was I saying? Oh yeah,
No, I was loving it all. No, yeah.
But yeah, orgasmic cakes in the end. Everything is just a cake that gives you orgasms.
I mean,
And
it was a wild scene. I didn't get it at the beginning. I still don't quite get it now, but I enjoy watching it. Like with the Agent Smith theory, I've seen it about. I agree with it up to a point, and that is that I think he and Neo together make the one, because I look at them as opposites, yet like opposites attraction, like of a battery, minus and plus. Do you know what I mean? Neo is the positive, Smith is the negative. That is the way I see it. It is the yin and the yang, and I think Smith can't completely overturn the Matrix without Neo, and Neo can't defeat Smith, without him being infested by Smith. Do you know what I mean? And it's finding that balance of them two, and Neo realizing that, I think, at the end, and Smith doesn't realize that, which is why his speech at the end, and this is the thing with the many monologues in these sequels as well, but the particularly last monologue by Smith, he's like, "Why do you persist, Mr. Anderson?" Neo understands what he has to do. He understands the path that these two are connected. If for Smith to die, he has to die. And he's accepting of that, and he goes, "Because I choose to." Do you know what I mean? And that's where I think the determinism and the sort of free choice come into play. So I think they are both the one in that aspect. Tom, I'll throw the ball at you. What do you think?
I kind of agree with the sentiment that Neo and Smith together are the one, but maybe after Resurrections, there's someone else who should be added to make that a trinity.
Yes.
Thus making her name then a prophecy in some way. But yeah, no, I think you guys have made some really, really good points, to be honest, that I don't really want to add to and ruin. But I did notice like another sort of theme, which I don't know if maybe this is something maybe you guys have picked up on, or maybe if it was just like me coming into this after reading a bunch of like certain comics and books recently, and then just seeing this. I feel like there's an overarching theme, especially in Reload and Resurrections, about like the nature of faith and also religion, and religion as a sort of form of control. Because like I think that comes to a head with Morpheus more than anyone, because like he's fully believed in this prophecy that he's going to be the one who finds the one who ends up like saving mankind. And then he finds out that, oh yeah, this belief that you had, this thing that you put all your faith into, was actually just another method of control. And there have been many criticisms in the past levied towards religion as just being a tool of control. And it also raised some because I remember first watching the film and just like not liking Captain Locke. Thought he was a bit of a dickhead. Which is like, why are you getting in the way of Morpheus and crew? Why are you complaining? Like, they have the one. Why are you complaining? And now watching it, I remember thinking to myself, well, no, hang on. Why would anyone living in this world, living in Zion, even have like an ounce of just blind faith left? Like, how does religion come into your life when the planet has literally been taken over by robots? The sky has been blackened out, and you have people like living as batteries. How do you have faith in a world like that? So,
well,
I think that's like sorry, Jake, you go.
No, I was just going to say, I see what you're saying, and I agree with you. I don't look at it as religion per se. I look at it as more belief or like hope.
Yeah,
more than anything.
Like, yeah, I don't think that like the Wachowskis were writing it with the mind of going like we're having a go at the church here. I'm kind of just using like religion just to kind of like boost up the faith argument, and also because Neo is kind of a Jesus Messiah.
It's all over
type
the
figure.
yeah. It's on the
It's all
film.
it's all connected. It's all connected.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is the fact that they're still kind of playing with the idea of the Messiah role, because, like you both said about the architects explaining that Neo is designed, which again, I'm not. I don't want to bring all the zealots over here, but let's be honest. Like in the end of the day, a lot of the churches, they're not getting power because of faith. They gain power because of the propagandas they give about themselves.
Control.
So yeah, it's like more or less it is control that they're after, and for their purpose, they had changed the narrative multiple times. So Neo sort of falls into that kind of idea. So I don't think you're off with that. I just think sometimes a bit on the nose, especially when Neo dies and there's literally a cross of light coming out of him, and I'm like,
Yeah. Look, there's a time and a place for subtlety.
Hey, look, if the Wachowskis want subtle. Like, let's not kid ourselves. They laid it all out there for us.
That is very true.
What I love about the sequels, again, which I do think, again, people missed, was that it doubles down that it's a love story. At the crux of the film is Neo making a choice between his moral duty of, like, finding out, oh, I'm just another one of 6, and if I don't do what you say, everybody dies. So, I am responsible for the extinction of humankind. And I think as well in that scene, the architect's maybe bluffing. I think he's maybe trying to test Neo at times. But it's his determination, his choice of love, his love of Trinity. Architect is so certain she is going to die, and he fucking saves her. Do you know what I mean? He fucking saves her, and it's poetry. It rhymes. She saved him in the first one. He saves her in the second. It's a very sad ending in the third. But I just love that it's still central to all 3 films. Again, it quadruples it down in Resurrections, that this is a love story, and love and connection is the central theme of this. And again, I just think a lot of people, especially, maybe not so much now, but in 2003, when these films were coming out, I think people just wanted action, sci-fi, spectacle, and I think they maybe lost the love connection side of this film. Tom, what do you think of that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, because I think that's another kind of point I wanted to make on the last episode and also this episode, which I haven't done yet, is that, like, a lot of the time when I'm speaking to people about the Matrix, and it's usually people who just, they'll see the big blockbusters. They're not like film bros, essentially. They just like watch whatever's coming out. They'll maybe watch like some of the MCU, but not all of it. They just the general audience, essentially. And when I'm talking to them about the Matrix, 9 times out of 10, first thing they'll mention, or the thing they'll mention the most, is like they'll talk about like the action, just like, oh, how cool is it? Like, the famous like scene of him bending over backwards and the bullet time and like all the fights and all that. It's very rare that I actually find someone who's like the first thing they'll talk about is like the philosophy of it, or the fact that it's a love story. And I think that Jake is kind of right, that people, I think, sometimes miss out on a lot of the other themes within the films because they are just looking for the next big action set piece. Like, they want to see Morpheus stop a 4x4 with a katana. They want
hell yeah.
They want to see two like juggernauts like fucking smash into each other and explode whilst like Neo flies in through an explosion and like that's what they want to see. So then, like, when they're watching the scenes between Neo and Trinity, they're thinking to themselves, hurry this along, please. And they're not paying attention to it. But yeah, I completely agree with Jake that like the Matrix is first and foremost a love story, because I mean they literally, again, not subtle at all. They literally whack you on the head with it. That it's like Neo was saved in the first film by the power of Trinity's love, and Trinity was essentially saved in the second one by the power of Neo's love. When we get into Resurrections, we will finally prove this point.
And in Revolutions as well, the Wachowskis explore the idea of machines feeling the emotion of love with the character of Sati. Do you know?
Yes.
Where I can't remember the character's name, but Sati's father.
Yeah. Why wouldn't they love? It's just a word.
I love that. I love that explanation of. He's like, but you can feel love, and he's like, love is just a word. What matters is the meaning behind that word, the connection it brings. And I'm just like, fuck, man, that's amazing. That's also again, the Wachowskis exploring their sexuality and what they have to say about sexuality and connection and love. It's great stuff, man. I love it. Steph, what do you think?
Oh, I love everything about the programs and the whole sort of purgatory underground station. I love that. It is one of those again outside the box ideas, but it's brings something very new to it. Which, to be honest, I am kind of sad we only got to see that in the third film and not earlier on. I think if we had that on Reloaded, maybe earlier on, it maybe it would have been easier for some fans to come with the idea of it. Um, but again, I am one of those people that I really don't care about Zion. It looks ugly. I don't give a shit. I prefer to spend 20 more minutes in that subway. It looks so much better.
I don't know, man. That party they had in Zion after Morpheus' speech in Reloaded seemed hella horny.
Everybody gives that shit. Everybody,
I love it.
So many people complain about that. I'm like, this is great.
I love it. Like I love just like the shot compositions. Like sometimes, like just like it's just. I loved it. I thought, it was
and
great.
you're
Also,
intercutting with Neo and Trinity having sex.
yeah, it's
great.
showing us the pure human experience, the animalistic, what it means to be human experience. That robots, no matter how hard they try, can robots get horny? Tell me now, Jake. Can robots get horny?
Dude, you're kidding. Merovingian was literally gone.
That's not just a word. Horny is not
Hey,
just
man,
a word.
I'll give you 2 words, and I will say that machines can get horny, and that is Monica Bellucci.
Good point. Yeah.
So
no,
she's a machine. She's a program.
Yeah, that's
so.
the thing. I think this is maybe also somewhere where like Reloaded and Revolutions maybe sort of slacks, and maybe where some of the general audience get confused, because I initially got confused and did not realize that Persephone and the other guy whose name I'm not even going to bother pronouncing, so I'm just going to call him Mary. That's what I'm calling him now.
Merovingian.
Yeah, Mary. It took me a while into the film, like on my rewatch of it. And it was just like a moment where I was like, oh shit, they're programs. That wasn't obvious at all. Even though it probably was. They probably outwardly said it. I was like, I felt like that was kind of very, very much glossed over.
The Oracle as much tells Neo in just before the Agent Smith fight. She goes
again, like a film can tell you something, but it can tell you something in a way that glosses it over, whereby you don't pick up on it. I did not.
No,
pick
that's
up
fair
on
enough.
it.
But this is why I think the Matrix films deserve, especially the sequels, deserve rewatches, because it's so dense and people can miss out on these things.
Yeah, I also find that like rewatching it, I kind of appreciated the scene a bit more in Resurrections, where like Mary and gang like kind of just like randomly show up as like weird dirty hobos. Like initially when I saw that in the cinema, I was a bit like, I was loving this film. This is kind of a low point now. But now I can kind of appreciate it a bit more. And maybe on my second watch through of Resurrections, I'll probably appreciate it even more again. So,
just his performance is Paul Lambert's performance is brilliant. Steph, any last words on the sequels before we move on to the rest of it?
Oh my God! Where do we begin? Talk about the orgasmic cake code. Also, you said that don't get horny. The motherfucker got a blowjob in the fucking
true.
toilets. So it's like
after the orgasmic cake.
Yeah. So you're telling me that don't feel horny after you get a blowjob? I don't know.
I already told you. I keep forgetting that they're programs. Except that they can get horny now.
But yeah, no. Besides that, they're not bad films. That, like you said, that were made we had a really limited time to make these films. They needed more time, for sure. And you know what? Maybe more than 3 films. I would say. I think maybe it's one of those cases. Maybe they should have expanded those two sequels to another third film, maybe, because there's a lot of stuff. There's a
There's a
lot of
lot of stuff.
stuff.
But I think if you watch particularly Reloaded and Revolutions back to back, I think they work as one bigger picture, almost like Kill Bill. Do you know what I mean?
I do find like I feel like that it definitely works better watching them back to back, which is what I basically did, and maybe that it also helped me have a deeper appreciation for them than I did before. But yeah, I feel like if I'd watched Reloaded and then watched Revolutions a week later, I might have maybe been a bit like a bit harsher. But just binge it, people. It's 4 hours. What you know.
Yes, we've already alluded to the Wachowskis having their hands full during this time making these sequels, but they also had their hands in the Animatrix, a series of anime shorts, Enter the Matrix video game, and the Matrix comics, which they believe they wrote like 2 or 3 of those issues and collections. Tom, I'll go to you first. I know you're a big fan of the Animatrix. What does the Animatrix like mean to you? Do you have to watch it now? Is it part of the big Matrix experience when you ever want to watch the Matrix?
It's definitely one that I kind of like have to watch if I'm going through the Matrix. If for nothing else, but for just the second Renaissance. I'm going to be talking a lot about the Animatrix, but I will be primarily talking about the second Renaissance because, like, as good as like a lot of the other shorts are, second Renaissance is like up there. Viewers can't see, but I'm reaching up very high right now to signify how up there it is. I think it gives you, just gives you more background into the world. I think the world of the Matrix is kind of perfect for, anime style and animated style because, as we said in our last episodes, the Matrix is essentially as close to live action anime as the West will ever get. I gotta say, like just briefly talking about the other things, like the comics, I did not realize they were Matrix comics. Thank you for letting me know this because I'm now going to find them and read them. Enter the Matrix, I've never played, but I've heard of. I probably need to check that out, if for nothing else than the actual like live action footage they apparently put in the game, which they like filmed alongside Reloaded and Revolutions or something.
Yep.
That's just crazy to me, so I need to check that out. But yeah, Animatrix, I think it's something that everyone who is a fan of the Matrix should watch at least once. But I do recognize it's not going to be for everyone because I know some people just have aversions to animated projects or anime in general. I do think like 1 or 2 of the shorts are maybe a bit lackluster and maybe don't actually add much to the Matrix world and are maybe just their sort of like showcases. But then, as I said, you've got something there like the second Renaissance, which just, you've heard about how like the robots rose up and how humanity like blackened out the sun, but to actually like see it, and I think like the way it's shot and the way it's done is done in such a way that really captures the horror, especially in those moments after the sun is blackened and it kind of like goes back to like the battle, and it's just those quick cuts of like the human soldiers with like their faces just looking like a gas, like just broken as they're like going into war, just showing that like everyone at this point, the war is just unhinged. It's just death everywhere. Also seeing just the build-up of the initial, like, the building of the robot nation, the initial hatred towards them. I'm always reminded of that one scene of that, like, one female robot who's just, like, walking through the streets, just being attacked by people, and she's, like, begging with them, pleading with them, please, I'm real. And they just, like, rip off her, like, skin from her face and, like, shoot her in the head. Haunting stuff. And it does really set the scene, and I think gives you a better idea in the film than the films does, that ultimately this is all humanity's fault. It's not the machine's fault, really, when you think about it. Sure, did they maybe go too far, but what other choice did they have after we created them and then tried to shut them down, basically treated them like absolute shit, forced them into a war, blackened out their only source of energy? What else is a species going to do when it's faced with extinction? It's going to find any way to not be extinct. So, like, you can tell, dear listeners, that I have very little sympathy for the humans that, like, led this world to this point, and I think it was completely deserved in some ways. So yeah, I think Animatrix is, it's just a fantastic piece of media, to be honest, and I think everyone needs to watch it at least once if they're going through a Matrix rewatch. If you don't want to watch it again afterwards, fair enough, but it's an experience I think everyone should have.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say it expands upon the world in many interesting ways. You beautifully talked about the Second Renaissance. I agree with you. I think that's the best of the bunch. It's evident that that was written by the Wachowskis, that they're steeped in this world that they've created. Another, I can't remember the title of it, and I can't even remember the character's name, but one of them that actually helped my experience of a character in the sequels. You know the character that is the young kid who Neo saved?
Oh, the kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember his name, but
The kid.
The
Yeah,
kid,
I think he's just the kid.
the kid. Well, hey kid, you know. Well, it's him. In the sequel films, I was a bit like, is this character really necessary? Because I didn't really feel as if any themes, like, I thought there was going to be something there at the beginning because, Neo saved him and all of that.
No,
but
he
it doesn't
saved
really
himself.
with himself. But he saved himself. But it doesn't really amount to anything. And I just felt as in watching the shorts of the Animatrix of his story of Neo saying you saved yourself. For me, it makes a bit more, it's more of emotional weight than in Revolutions when he's like, Neo, I believe, and he takes down the door, so he can save them, buy them some time and stuff like that. So yeah, for me, it really helps the world. It expands it. Again, if you don't fly with anime or animation, that's fine. I don't think it's necessary to watch this, but I think if you have any interest in this world, I think it definitely enhances the experience. I remember playing Enter the Matrix when, at some point on PS2, very fuzzy memories of that, and it didn't really stick with me, but then I've watched since then, just on YouTube, all the live footage cut together with cutscenes and stuff like that. And the only thing I can think of, thinking about this with also the Wachowskis' involvement in the comics, the game, and this, I'm like, they were ahead of the game with all of this stuff, to have this multimedia storytelling, stuff that we're kind of used to now. And in a way, it's it's still very much experimentation with a lot of companies that say, what if we start a story on TV and follow it through on film, that sort of stuff. They were ahead of the game, man. They were doing this in 2003 and mixing all this with the video games and stuff. I just think it's fascinating that they were able to get away with this. And even though not all of it works, not all of it's perfect, the fact that they even got it all out there is an achievement in itself. And all of it was 2003. 2 films, a video game, and a comic book series, and 9 anime shorts. Damn, man, that's a lot of work. Steph, what are your thoughts on any of the expanded Matrix stuff?
But yeah, like what you all kind of said, very much I agree with. The Second Renaissance is fantastic. Like if there was another Matrix in between the sequels, I would have loved if that was the intro of the film, starting seeing the new perspective. Because I think if that existed in one of the films, I think a lot of the fans who were critical, about programs feeling love, if they had seen that, they would be like, they have a point. And that would have changed the conversation. That would have been so fascinating. But as for necessity, I do believe the Second Renaissance is kind of necessary, because especially to where Resurrections goes.
Okay, I'll give you the Second Renaissance, but not necessarily the others.
Yeah.
In matter of necessity, yeah, it's not necessary. But Final Flight of the Osiris is actually quite important.
Yeah, I really like that one as well.
That ties
That was a
into the
good
video game as well.
In the video game, and in some way, it is the opening or a prelude to Reloaded, because that is the initial act. That this is the one that makes our heroes to act upon it, because that's the message that they get, that the machines know where we are and they're gonna fucking kill us, and like, oh yeah, that's actually big stakes. That would have been interesting opening. Um, but again, I do like the opening of Reloaded, even though the whole slow machine gun shooting with a terrible bullet CGI. I'm like, okay, yeah, that could have been a bit less. Um, but yeah, no, overall, I do like them. I have a very, very soft spot for a detective story because this isn't that I love noir. I really love anime. I love anime noir. So, and I love sci-fi. So I really love anime noir sci-fi shit.
The Animatrix is perfect there.
There we go. So I really love that segment. And generally speaking, I really like this kind of storytelling. It's the kind of stuff that the reason why I love Death and Robots and or in some capacity Black Mirror because they're all kind of sort of expanding a sort of narrative through the use of animation, but multiple use of it. I mean, not Black Mirror, but it is the same idea of expanding the world and the philosophy that they coexist with a centered narrative. But yeah, big fan. And once again, justice for Ghost. I'm very angry that he wasn't even in Resurrection. So I'm like, why the fuck not? I mean, he seemed to be he's number two of Niobe. Why couldn't he be vice president or something?
Maybe he was dead by then, Steph.
How dare you?
Maybe he could have
He
died
died.
and become a real ghost.
If Morpheus died, you know Ghost is going. Okay, so we've talked about everything up to 2003. Revolutions has come out. The story's finished.
Oh.
The Matrix is over, right? That's what we all think. And we go years and years and years loving the first one and debating amongst us the sequels.
Yeah.
Thinking very much like Star Wars after the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy where we all thought, well, that's it, I guess. But no. As is the case with these things in Hollywood recently, everything needs a reboot or a requel or a sequel or a prequel, all the quills. And Lana Wachowski had something to say about The Matrix for a fourth installment. So, Steph, on this one, I go to you. Like, what was your initial reaction when you heard that Warner Bros. Are making a fourth Matrix film with Lana Wachowski returning?
Back then, damn, good old times before the pandemic. I was so young and naive. I was very excited. I was one of the few who were very optimistic because we've discussed this, a couple of weeks now, the fact that how the Matrix has been very that how real it ended up everything being, how relevant all these conversations about existence, philosophy, and the uses of technology very much echoes today. So I felt back then that this is a perfect time to talk about the Matrix again because we're so fucking deep into the shit, and what a better example to have than cinematic allegory that is the Matrix. Like, why not? It seems the best thing for it, and especially when they announced that both Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss were returning. At that point, all the theories we were having was beautiful and pure chaos. Still very, very skeptical why we didn't have Lawrence Fishburne back, but that is for a different time.
Yeah. Tom, what about yourself? What was your initial reaction when you heard, oh, they're doing another Matrix movie?
I just remember sort of like scrolling through Facebook or Twitter and just seeing, day's news and all that. And just scrolling, and all of a sudden I just saw an article saying Lana Wachowski is back to direct Matrix 4. Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss also slated to return. And I swear I was just staring at that piece of news, and all of a sudden in my head I just heard the bass line to Wake Up just playing on a loop. It's like boom, 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 boom. So I was very, very happy, and like everyone else, I had a myriad of theories because I was like, well, hang on a minute. Trinity and Neo are dead as some dodos. So what? And then like when they were like, oh yeah, so those two are back, but Lawrence Fishburne's Morpheus isn't back. And I was like, right, what? What even? What? This? What? How? Explain it to me. So yeah, it was a wild time. I remember like, well, when we talked about it on the show, when initially we were just given a written description of what the trailer was, and we read out what the description was. And I remember at the time thinking like, I'm actually like quite scared this is going to be disappointing because this just sounds a bit shit, to be honest. I think it was that one line when they were saying about like Neo is in the elevator and he notices he's the only one not staring at his phone, and I was just like, is it going to be one of these ones? But then actually seeing the trailer, and I was like, oh my god, that description didn't do it justice. I'm going to blame it on how you read it out, Jake, because the trailer was amazing.
Blame it on how it was described, maybe.
Yes. But you're right here. So, but yeah, I thought the trailer was amazing, and it just bolstered the hype. And I was hype right up until the moment of seeing it. And because I know people are wondering what our thoughts of Resurrections were, I'm just going to say now that I fucking loved it.
There it is.
Fuck all the haters.
Hey, spoilers.
Spoilers. Yeah, we'll get to that.
Well, no, like, you know what? I'm just chucking it right out there. Just no subtlety whatsoever. Much
He
like
loves the movie.
Resurrections.
He loves the movie. Yeah, very much like you guys, I was both really excited that we were coming back to this world, but also
Back to the Matrix.
But also, huh? Like, it was just a huge question mark of like, well, what the hell? How do you do a fourth Matrix film? And then Keanu's
Like
back.
this.
And Carrie-Anne Moss is back. And then I remember saying, like, oh, they're going to bring Lawrence Fishburne back. And they didn't announce it straight away. They announced that Yahya Abdul-Mateen II was in the cast, but they didn't say who he was playing. Naturally, everyone online, we all, for some reason, we can only think of one black person. And it's like, do you know what I mean? No, it's true. Like, so we instantly go to, oh, well, he must be playing a new version of Morpheus. And so that got everybody's brains ticking, and mine. I was like, oh, what the hell's this? So yeah, I was very excited. And for me, very much like Steph, like thinking of where we are now with technology, especially social media, which I don't even think the Wachowskis foresaw of how social media was going to end up. Thinking about all that, and thinking about also the Wachowskis' filmography up to that point, everything they've done since the Matrix films, and how they've grown as filmmakers, I was like, okay, they have something to say here. They must have something to say about how we treat technology now, what the digital age, and what's that sort of like. And I was also really excited for the prospect of rejigging the game again in terms of blockbusters and action and what they should be, compared to like my thoughts on modern day blockbuster action, where it's a lot of quick, shaky cams and quick cut editing and stuff like that. You don't really feel the fights anymore, I feel. Well, you do in some films, but on a general scale. And how wrong I was about the Resurrections in that regard. So I was very excited in that sense. And we saw the trailer, the song, White Rabbit. I was like, this is perfect. I feel as if I'm watching, this is like very dream-like, this trailer. You're still questioning what's reality and all that. Then we get into the film, and oh boy, everything I thought I wanted about the film came true and also didn't come true. And I think that's exactly what Lana Wachowski was kind of going for, which I really, really respect. So, Steph, let's talk about it then. I went with you. We were there opening night, or opening day. We went for a 2:00 screening in IMAX. And you even said to me in the lobby, we were like, how is it like 15 years later, we're nearly in our 30s and we're going to see a new Matrix film? Like, this is absolutely crazy. What's your overall thoughts of the movie? Like, do you have a different thoughts of the movie now from when you first walked out of the cinema?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is yes, because I had a lot of time to think about it. I guess there's a lot of stuff in it. It's the kind of film that it's film, but it's film with all the film that a film could be film. And yeah. If you thought my relationship with the sequels was complicated, this is like we both on our Facebook profiles. We are like, it's complicated. So um, overall, though, I fucking love this film. But I love it in the sense that it knows what is on. Like the thing that I would wanted they wanted to do with Reloaded, to kind of be aware of itself. They were so fucking aware. They were maybe even too aware. But I like that. I like that kind of intercontextual meta shit. I am into it. A lot of us are not. And if you're not into meta, that's fine. Then definitely not gonna like this film. Absolutely fine. Me, on the other hand, the first hour of the film, I fucking loved it. And I loved it because I was fucking laughing all the time because this was, it felt almost the shit that Lana was thinking. They're like definitely she was very honest to the matter of the industry and the fandom and what is to be supposedly expected for a Matrix film. And really, like if what you said about Reloaded is starting twisting what the first one said, fuck me, Lana just twists the whole fucking genre. And it's very brave. Like I think that is what I appreciate the most. It's a very brave move to do, especially with a huge blockbuster sequel, to do something like that and to actually be able to say that in a sort of endearing way. Because in the end, what you've been saying for all this time, it is a love story, and that is the main focus officially. This is official confirmation saying all of this happened because of those two people loving each other. I don't think it's as great as I wish it was. I definitely have issues, but I think surprisingly, it's the issues that I wanted to see in the previous sequels, but this feels like an improv. This feels like this group of artists and storytellers just were improvising as they was going along. And I don't mean it as a bad way. I mean it as they were finding something new to say each time. I think for me, where it kind of lacks is when it kind of becomes again into this. Basically, once we were introduced to Sakti and we started having the plan, I was like, oh, I didn't want a plan. Let's go more into intro stuff. Like, yeah, bring Meravision again, the fucking crazy hobo. Like, that's like that. All of a sudden, like it used entertainment on its own way to make a point, and that is fascinating to see. In 2021, now 2022, and I'm kind of sad that a lot of people really hated the film. Um,
I get it though. That's the thing. Like, other than Reloaded and Revolutions, with Resurrections, I understood more. And I'm saying right now, I also fucking love the movie. But I also understand watching this film why a lot of people didn't connect with it. And it is the meta self-awareness of it, really doubling down on it and like throwing it in your face. Like almost like a fuck you Lana Wachowski is giving like the industry and the audience as well. So I can understand as an audience member almost being offended, especially as a fan of The Matrix, because there's a lot of scenes in here where they're really poking at the fans, very blatantly. And when I was watching it, I felt it like, that's me. Interesting. Like, and what do you do with that? Do you know what I mean? And so I took it as like, I see what Lana's doing. I had to really think about my own fandom and how I look at the Matrix films as well. Do you know what I mean? But I can understand audiences going, hey, what the hell are you doing making fun of me sort of thing.
In a very weird way, it does exactly the same. Actually, does exactly the same. They both kind of were made at the same time. The new Scream does the same thing. But I think the difference is like Scream was always self-aware, and that's why this kind of got away. While with Matrix, let's be honest, the majority of its fandom is not very self-aware of itself and its own toxicity. Like it really is not, and I think I really embraced that attitude of the film because of all the brilliant, beautiful fandoms over the last decades we've been exposed to, and I think that kind of feeling that I've been really very much expressing, to see that in the Matrix film, it felt cathartic. The fact that I was saying, "Oh, thank you for actually agreeing with my point of all these stupid, silly, mostly white fuckers." Thank you.
Lana again, giving the man the finger. Not in that sense. Tom,
Well, that would have been, well, maybe in some point of view.
maybe, yeah, who knows? Tom, so we already got your initial, I fucking love this movie. Give us a bit more, man. What do you think?
I mean, like, very much the same as you. Like, I do completely understand why people wouldn't like it. It's not like other movies, like for example, I'll use No Way Home because I will be using that as an example for something else later on. Like, it's one of those films where, like, I absolutely love No Way Home, and it's like I can understand if people don't fully vibe with it, but I did not understand Dave's relentless hatred of it. Just didn't get it. Whereas with Resurrections, even though I absolutely love this film and I think it's brilliant, at the same time, if someone came up to me and was just like, I viscerally hate this film, I'd be like, I get it, man, and I'm not going to take that away from you. I do think like it is the meta commentary. I think not just because of the fact it is basically saying to most Matrix fans, yeah, you, fuck you.
You're all wrong.
Yeah. I also think just, for a lot of people, meta type stuff doesn't gel with them. Me, that's like kind of my jam. I mean, one of my favorite TV characters is Abed Nadir from the hit TV show Community. And just like generally a lot of my favorite comic books, hi Grant Morrison, are very, very, very meta. So just like I'm okay with meta narratives. I do remember though, like being in the cinema and like initially I was picking up on some of the meta commentary and I was like, okay, I can sort of see the basis of what you're going for here. And then it's that scene between Smith and Neo before they both realize who they are. And he's just like, look, Warner Brothers want to make there. And then I was just there like, oh, for real? We're doing this? Wait, what? He said the word Warner Brothers.
That was the moment in the cinema, and Steph will attest to this, where I cheered and clapped. That's when they name dropped Warner Brothers. Couldn't believe it.
Just like, no fucking way. No fucking way. Did she do? She did it. She did it though, and she did it amazingly. Yeah, I think just going off why people might dislike the film, because like we could probably talk a lot about that. I want to talk about the things I did like. So the new characters, I really dug them. Bugs especially. I kind of agree with Steph to the degree that like things do dip a little bit towards the end, especially when they come together for the plan. I was thinking to myself like this. It's like the Matrix has this weird relationship with like big, huge, heady ideas in that it can get them across really well, but then sometimes as well they're also kind of just like, this thing just happened, we can't explain it, just accept it. Which can work narratively when you're just like, look, the truth doesn't matter. What matters is what's happening, and that is kind of like a message they do send across. But I think the final act of Resurrections, it somehow does both, whereby it doesn't explain. It basically explains the general idea, but it doesn't give you like the important details to like make the idea fully like work. It didn't like set in my head. Like a lot of it, I was just like, in the end, I was kind of just like, oh, they come up with the plan and they save the day. I was like, how they did it doesn't matter. What matters is that they did it. So I guess in a way, Lana Wachowski won. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I'm with you in the sense of like the plan itself. Like the second act dips for me a bit in terms of like pacing. It's more when like Neo gets like pulled out of the pod again. Do you know what I mean? And from then on, like I love some of the cool world building. Like, oh, we're now working with the machines, and the machines actually had their own war against each other. I loved all that, but it was pacing issues of just like, you're just telling me this. Maybe a bit more interesting. You know, as we said in the first one, that's what the first film does so well, is that it does exposition really interestingly by giving you all these interesting set pieces, different camera angles, different locations and stuff like that. Exposition through action, which I don't think we really got that here. It was very much like, Neo, sit down. We're going to tell you what's happened in the last 60 years. And Neo's like, it's been 60 years. And, you know, Niobe's all old and stuff. Like, so yeah, it dips for me there. And I'm on board for the plan. Like, I'm like, I get what you're going for, the gist of it. But for me, it was just the sweeping romance of that finale. I was just totally on board for it. I thought it was really well shot by Lana, like them entering the cafe and all of that. I thought Neil Patrick Harris as a villain, he wasn't even really the villain. He was like the antagonist, you could say.
Yeah.
And I just love, like, he was also like the architect, was his predecessor, and everything that he explained and how he brought Neo and Trinity back, and that is the missing link between them two. That's why I love how it all concludes in the end. And the first act, the first hour is incredible, but for me, it's more, again, like the other two sequels, it's more technical stuff that let the film down for me, pacing and things like that, and some story points, like while I'm loving Jonathan Groff as some version of Agent Smith, I didn't quite latch on to like his sort of part in the story, if you know what I mean.
Chaos, revenge.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, but I felt that was a bit weak for me personally. I was like, I don't know if he really added anything over to the bigger picture of the story. They could, maybe, if they choose to explore sequels. There was definitely some form of hint there. But what I really love again about this film is that it's Lana going, again, like, I tried to explain this to you guys for 3 movies and you still don't get it. That sort of thing. You know, it's one of those things. I'm going to make it so obvious you can't miss it. This is more than the previous 3 films. It truly is a love story. Like, it's right there. It's all, the plot is about Neo getting Trinity out so they can be together. That is essentially the plots for once he comes out of the Matrix. You know what I mean? And I think as well that it's going back thematically that Neo can't be the one without Trinity. And I will die on the hill that saying that the most important character in the original trilogy is Trinity. She is the reason Neo is the one. Like, he's not technically the one in my eye and he doesn't even believe he's the one. He's only acting to be the one because the Oracle told Trinity that she would fall in love with the one. You see where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
So Trinity is the most important part of the story, I think. And you said it beautifully at the top, Tom, where if Agent Smith and Neo combine that one to make it the full picture, you bring in the Trinity. Do you know what I mean? And again, we're getting some more biblical references with the Father and the Son, the Holy Spirit sort of thing. I just love that they bring it full circle, and that the end of this story is Neo and Trinity. This is how this story ends, and I do think it's like a nice sort of epilogue that it almost closes out Neo's story and Trinity's story, for me, much nicer than in Revolutions.
Yeah, I agree with that overall. It does. And also, in a way, the way it ends, it does end with that conclusive way of saying, oh, this is the truth. But now, this time, we're actually having proper representatives within the Matrix to be able to actually fix the truth and continue on. And also, a big point, I really like Io. Like, that is so much better than Zion. I'm like, yeah, okay, this is actually one to protect. You
Yeah,
know
they
what?
grow strawberries.
They throw strawberries, and also I love the idea of AIs and humans working together, which again, very very much like the Animatrix that really expands from that. I think my this is where it gets weird. Even what I said before about the facial matrix, that it has a very simple plot, but it has a very deep story. With Resurrections, my issue is when the film tries to be plot, because I love the story, but be less plot. So basically, do weird shit, do weird shit, and you can get so many things out of it. But then it started becoming, oh yeah, we have to make a sort of sense of getting to point A to point B,
We have to make a
and
film.
yeah, I know. And then I was just at a meal, just in the corner of my room, was thinking, nah, fuck that.
It's almost like Lana wanted to make like an art house Matrix film.
Dude, yeah, I'll be in. I'm like, for reals. Give me a whole 2 hours of the whole meeting about talking about the Matrix and shit. I'm like, I'm in. I mean, the post credit scene where we both were watching and we were like, oh, so that's how we end it. This is gonna be like an actual fuck you to all the Marvel films and fans.
That's why when I again, people going, that's like the worst post-credit scene in cinema history. I'm like, that is the point of that post-credit scene. It is criticizing post-credit scene. Like she's trying to say something here. But anyway, what else do we want to talk about? I mean, there's so much to talk about in the Resurrections. To fit it all within the time we've got. I like to say as well that my thoughts about going in of like, oh, I really hope they change the game in terms of action. I was one of those people Lana was criticizing or almost making fun of in the film, because that was one thing I felt is like, for me, I felt as if they could have done a bit more with the action. Like, I get the idea of like the action not being the focus and doubling down on that theme. I still think the action could have been handled a bit better considering the legacy of the Matrix's action. That's just my thing as well.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree, because like especially towards the end of the film, the action just kind of just subsided down to like fighting through, pushing through people and huge hordes of people. And yeah, like the action didn't need to be the focus. It didn't need to have like shootouts on a freeway or anyone slicing up trucks with katanas and shit. But like the action that they did have, it was like sometimes it felt like, yeah, we're back watching a Matrix films, and then like other shots would be like, this seems like they're trying to be a Matrix action scene but not quite landing it. What I do like, which I think Jake, you pointed out to me for the first time, I think it was you who told me this, is the fact that Trinity and Neo don't fire a gun at all.
Yeah, they don't even hold a gun.
See, there we go.
Yeah, it's a cool little detail.
Yeah, another thing of Lana just being like, "Fuck you, fuck you."
No
gun,
no guns here, no guns here. Yeah, I think for me the best fight has to be the Neo Smith fight.
Yeah, as per usual.
As per usual, I thought that had the best choreography, the best setting, and Jonathan Groff, I think he did a wonderful performance. Considering he's never done a role like this, any action roles or anything like this, I felt he slid right in there. And funnily enough, I felt he fit perfectly in the world of the Matrix. He brings in that right element of camp and flamboyance that the Matrix needs. Do you know what I mean?
He does like genuinely feel like Agent Smith, if Agent Smith was originally written today. Almost, it's like he still has there was a lot of points where like I was getting like Hugo Weaving vibes from him, but obviously he's not Hugo Weaving, so we can't get all the mannerisms and little ticks and hamminess down to a T. But yeah, and it's like, but I still felt it was the same character, which I think is sign of good writing, to be honest. If you're trying to essentially make someone with a brand new personality, but it still feels like the same character. Some Doctor Who writers could take notes from that.
Let's talk about that next year. But yeah, the only thing I would like to add is, even though I loved the opening with New Morpheus, because the whole idea of a program awakening, that
was fucking cool.
That is fantastic, but I wish we had explored it more in the film. I think if that was sort of
Wasn't it as
the
well? Wasn't
plot.
it created by Neo
Yeah, he
subconsciously
was
as
within
well?
a
Yeah.
Yeah,
modal within the Matrix
yeah,
itself, and he was meant to be like a Smith Morpheus amalgamation, which I think some people have like maybe missed out on the fact he wasn't meant to be Morpheus. He's meant to be a mix of the two characters, which I loved that personally, but like it did take me a brief second to like just be like, okay, so this is the deal. Okay, I get it now. I understand.
yeah. Steph, any closing thoughts on Resurrections then?
Um, uh, uh,
Oh, well said. Well
so,
said. Ow, abu.
Ow, ow.
I'd say it's the kind of film I really wanted. It's not the film that I really ended up needing, but I am very, very proud to what Lana did. And I do believe that in the following years and decades, a lot more people will come to appreciate it. Maybe even more than people who love the previous sequels, because I think this is unique. This is very special. This is something that you would watch on a very weird, eccentric art house show for one episode, but it's like 2 hours long. And yeah, I'm very, very impressed. Like you both said, I understand the hate, but I think it's one of those things that time will prove that it's so much better than a lot of haters think. I just hope, you know, it's not bad to think sometimes things about yourself and, kind of be critical about your own behavior. I mean, if big blockbuster films like The Matrix are able to do it, the fans should do it too.
I agree. Yeah, for me, like I agree with you. I think this is a very special film for Lana Wachowski, and I also feel this is very personal for her as well. Hearing all the behind the scenes of originally how this idea got sprung from her mind, it's an incredibly sad story, but it's also for her to grieve through her art and wanting to tell this story. I think it's special. It is really special, and for me, it's my favorite sequel in this franchise. And if I was to rate them, it would be the first one because it's just so iconic and it introduced us to this world. Then Resurrections, then Reloaded, then Revolutions. I think it's a wonderful film. Not everything works, but I hope people come around to it. I do think it was unfortunate for it that it was released around the time of No Way Home. I do think that hindered it in terms of people going to the cinema, box office.
Also, the HBO Max day and date release.
Day and date, yeah. That also didn't help.
Which, by the way, fuck you, Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
Yes, fuck you, Warner Brothers again.
Yes, the second fuck you, Warner Brothers of the year.
Technically, we brought it up. Lana Wachowski did it when we talked about The Matrix. So
That's true.
And I also think how this film handles nostalgia is very different to how No Way Home handles nostalgia. And I think they're almost contrasting in a way, and I think that would also didn't help it coming along released at the same time. I think Scream got that little bit of time after No Way Home, which was a bit easier for it. But yeah, overall, I love this film so much, and I hope people just give it a chance if you haven't watched it already, or if you've seen it and sat there with your arms crossed, not wanting a fourth Matrix film, give it another chance and just dig a little bit deeper into this film. Tom, any closing thoughts on Resurrections?
Just that it just reminds me of me. It's a hot mess.
But we love you, Tom.
Exactly, and I love it. So there's a lot of love going around here, and yeah,
It's a love story.
it's a love story. Everything is a love story.
Everything
This
will
is
be a love
definitely
story from now on.
But yeah, like I love the film. Same as you guys, I urge everyone to give it like a second chance at some point, like, and just give it like proper time to like think about it. Like, don't make a snap judgment after you watch it. Just sit there, maybe have a smoke and a nice cup of tea, and just think. Let's just talk about Resurrections. I think like I agree with you. I reckon just as the years go by, it'll become just like more and more loved because it'll just keep becoming relevant. Especially if more film companies keep doubling down on the nostalgia of it, or to borrow a term from Dave, if they keep weaponizing nostalgia, then yeah, people are going to be looking at Resurrections and just being like, you make some good points. So clearly the people making those good points are the young people, referencing a line from Reloaded, very obscure line, but I'm going for it. So yeah, just everyone should give all the sequels another go, really. The Resurrections especially. And I would also argue that you could probably get away with not watching Reloaded and Revolutions in order to like actually fully appreciate Resurrections. I don't actually think you do.
I'm going to disagree with you there. I think you do. I think like
I'm not saying like you know they're not necessary, but I think you can get away with it because like I went into seeing Resurrections having not seen Reloaded and Revolutions in fucking donkey's years, and I've forgotten a lot more than I remembered about those movies, and I still really loved Resurrections.
All right, I'll give you that it might not be like 100% necessary. I think it's like 90% necessary, but I think if you do watch I think it just enriches the experience of Resurrections if you do watch the sequels.
If you're going to watch Resurrections, you may as well watch the whole quadrilogy. I'm just saying, if you really, really don't want to watch Reloaded and Revolutions, but are thinking about watching Resurrections, don't let that stop you. Just go for it. Go for it, man.
Do your thing, man.
Do your thing, Chicken Wing.
Do your thing.
Ugh. Can't believe I said that. Ugh. Never again.
It's all right. Never again. Right, let's get out of here then. This has been quite the episode now, talking about the whole Matrix franchise now over 2 wonderful episodes. Steph, thank you for coming on board for this. It's been an absolute pleasure to get your insights and knowledge on the Matrix films. And it's just been a hell of a lot of fun as well.
Oh yeah, this is so much fun. And to be honest, I could talk for hours about films that I really love and do think they're masterpieces. But I love even more to talk about films that are problematic, they have issues, and they're not perfect. There's always something really interesting and wonderful thing to say about these kind of films.
Taking chances from the Wachowskis. So, yep, thank you all listeners for listening to this episode. We appreciate people coming on board every week, listening to us discuss and geek out about all this wonderful stuff. But if you want to continue the conversation, Steph, where can people find you online and what are you getting up to?
You can find me on my Twitter account, and actually, I changed my thingy, and you can find me at Stephen Things.
Hey!
Yay! We did it! Stephen Things!
You can find me there where I really try to push for the 2 foreign language films to win some fucking awards in the Academy. They're not going to give it to them, but fuck it, I'm trying. So if you find the films Drive My Car and The Worst Person in the World, holy shit, go watch them. Tweet about it because they don't trust the Academy for anything anymore.
I do want to watch those films. They're on the list, Steph. They're on the list. Tom, how about yourself?
People can find me on Twitter at Comic Book Shogun, where I will be basically celebrating Steph changing his name to Stephen Things. And also I'm currently trying to start wars with Wanda stands because they keep just giving me the shittest takes I've ever seen on Twitter. I'm going to poke that bear, even if it kills me.
Careful. You don't want to... Those Wanda stands can be pretty brutal at times.
I'm scared. Jake.
You should be. You can also find me on Twitter at SweatyJake and on Letterboxd at Jake Hart. Get all my hot film takes on there. And as for the show, we're also on social media on Twitter and Facebook at Capes, Cows, Masks. You can find us on Acast, Spotify, Google, TuneIn, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music, and YouTube. We're all over the place. Now. We're expanding. The empire's expanding. There is a delay on YouTube, listeners. I do apologize. I'm just slowly uploading some of our episodes on there. But yes, we're on all the spots now, so whatever, we're accessible to everybody. So whatever your favorite spot is, check us out on there. And if you're on Apple or Spotify, leave us a rating and a review. All helps us go up in the rankings. So we're going to see you all next week for the start of our Batman month. Now, of course, it is the month of the Batman. Of course, we're going to be reviewing the film, The Batman. But we'll be starting our Batman month with Tom leading the show on this one, where we're going to be talking all the influences and origins of what makes the Batman who he is and this new film. So stay tuned for that and catch up on your Batman comics for that one. So we'll see you all next week. Stay safe, everyone. Goodbye.